Is South Africa becoming a haven for money laundering? While the Financial Action Task Force is raising various red flags, South Africa is facing a grey listing by the International Money Laundering Watchdog. This, of course, an extra burden that the struggling economy doesn't need. Let's discuss this now with Senior Lecturer in Forensic Accountancy at the Northwest University, Duane Aslett. Mr. Aslett, good morning and thank you very much for your time. Now, money laundering has yet again become that area of focus in the wake of the Palapala farm allegations. And today we really wanted to look at the role of forensic accounting in the fight against money laundering. But firstly, just for the benefit of those who might not be familiar with this specialized field, just talk us through it.
So, good morning. So money laundering basically entails taking illicit income, which is derived from some form of predicate offense, and then putting it through some processes of making it seem like legitimate income, so that those who are looking will not be aware that the income was derived from illegal activities, and it will make the money launderer seem like a legitimate business person who has obtained the income through legal means.
And then how critical a role, though, does now forensic accounting play in fighting money laundering itself?
Well, it's following the money trail. So, so if one looks at a typical money laundering scheme, and of course not all of them have these steps, but the first step would be placement in some kind of financial system, after which there'll be a number of layering transactions to try and remove the funds from the illegitimate source. So layers of transactions, and if they can go cross-border, even better, and to tax havens, even more so. And then in the end, integrating the funds to the launderer as legal income so that it can be spent. And that is where forensic accountancy would come in, is to follow that money trail to untie these complex transactions and to try and prove that the money was obtained through illicit income, through illicit sources.
You know, Duane, we're really not winning this money laundering fight in South Africa currently. It seems to be a haven, in fact, at this point. Why do you think this is? Because I know with you at the university, you're probably churning a lot of accountants. Is it a situation where many of them don't want to go and work for some of these law enforcement agencies because even their capacity seems to be a problem?
Well, yeah, there's been I don't want to say reluctance, but the take-up of forensic accountancy in law enforcement has been slow. It has started now recently. There has been, for instance, in the Hawks, a forensic accounting division, but it certainly is something that we are really battling with. And the reason is because over time, money laundering has developed into a professional service. So the launderer, him or herself, doesn't need the skills to launder funds. There are professional people who help, whether it be lawyers, accountants, or any other trade. And these professional launderers have systems in place already to launder the funds, so it makes it easier. They are often available online, these kind of services, and of course they don't have to be local. You can sit in with technology these days, internet banking, etc. You can sit anywhere in the world and have a money laundering service for criminals. So it's become very professional, which means on the law enforcement side we need to be more professional in how we tackle this. We need the multidisciplinary approach, as we speak about, to tackle these offences.
I'm glad you actually tackled the elephant in the room, which is the professionalization of this particular form of crime, because we're seeing the legal fraternity somehow being roped into this quite often. I mean, we've spoken to one guest of ours before about the number of times where we've had a lawyer in some shape or form being involved in some sort of criminal activity where money was put in trust with the lawyer and then it was transferred to this or that other account. I mean, how difficult has it honestly become now if you've got professionals who somehow are able to move around money for criminals in this respect?
Well, it's because money laundering schemes have become much more complex than in the beginning. You know, in the beginning it was siphoning money into my brother or my sister's account and, you know, just to remove it from myself. But obviously over time and as law enforcement has improved, and to some extent, unfortunately, law enforcement will always be almost one step behind, because as you clamp down on one industry, for instance, at this point, the banking industry, is highly regulated in terms of money laundering. Criminals find other ways, less regulated manners in which to launder their funds. So the use of shell companies, of trusts, as you say, because they are quite difficult to find, because they trusts are dealt with by the master of the High Court. So it's various masters across the country. So that's where lawyers come in, setting up companies for clients and trusts, etc. And as I say, it's become much more complex schemes in how to launder the funds. And because there are professionals involved, over time, the skills have improved in how to launder money without raising suspicion.
So in the absence now of the requisite skills within the law enforcement agencies, is it really a better option to seek the expertise of those in private practice? For instance, I mean, we saw the biggest banking scandal, VBS. They relied on those in the private practice. It was Advocate Terry Mudau as well as Werksman's attorney. We've even seen it with state capture. Most of those advocates were from the private practice. So is it better in that respect now? Because some have criticized that, to say you've hollowed out hawks. We don't have advocates that are competent. We don't have the accountants that are competent. Currently, there's not a lot of them. So you're relying on the external. Is it better perhaps at this point, if they're not enticed to come fully to work for Hawks, to continuously be relying on those in the private practice?
I think it goes beyond simply the Hawks. If one looks overseas, for instance, in the UK, the private-public partnerships has picked up a lot there, because in these complex times, and we have a decided case of State versus Botha where the court held that you can't rely only on a police force to combat crime in these complex times. So the move towards public-private partnerships and saying it's all hands on deck to fight this phenomenon. That's almost an international move. So certainly in South Africa too. I think there's no more question about it. We do need for a public-private partnership initiatives to combat these kinds of offences, because a lot of the money laundering happens in the private sector. If one looks at the accountable institutions that are normally targeted for money laundering purposes, like banks is one, but there's casinos, there's life insurance industry, there's estate agents. There's a number of ways in which criminals could launder their funds in the private sector. So you need that assistance from the private sector in finding these transactions and investigating them and bringing the culprits to book. So the short answer is yes, we need to move to public-private partnerships to fight this phenomenon.
And then just in closing, your take on the Palapala allegations. I know that facts are still contested at this point. Details are honestly very sketchy. But just your initial impression, just looking at what has happened. We had a head of state who opted to keep money in cash. We do not know the quantum as yet, but nevertheless, there was cash and it is in dollars. What is your take on this?
The thing with money laundering is what one must remember is it's the proceeds of crime. So in order for funds to be laundered, we must prove a predicate offence to say, well, what crime caused these proceeds? Hiding money under a mattress is exactly the opposite of what money laundering entails. If one think of Pablo Escobar, for instance, he was hiding cash. He had so much cash, he didn't know what to do with it, so he was hiding it all over the place. And what happened was the money that he buried rotted, the money in ceilings were eaten by rats. And in the end, he needed to get these funds into the financial system, place it in the financial system, go through, and he colluded with a bank, a BCCI. It doesn't exist anymore. It was a substantial bank in the world, but it was the Panama branch that colluded and got involved with laundering the funds. So, in terms of cash lying under a mattress, there's not even placement yet in terms of a money laundering scheme. And again, it needs to be proven that these are the proceeds of crime. What is the predicate offence that led to all this cash? For instance, drug trafficking in the case of Pablo Escobar. So, like you say, there's very little facts to state that this is money laundering.
All right, Duane, thank you very much, though, for your inputs. That was Northwest University's Duane Aslett. More news.